So guys, welcome. Welcome to Logan Startup Hub and EC Connect. Tonight we're very lucky to have James Peterson with us. I was very lucky to meet James at Beanley Rum Distillery, but it wasn't for a drinking night. It wasn't for a drinking night. It was a very good event that the Beanley Yattley Chamber of Commerce put on. And then from that, we had him to EC Connect and we had his presentation for our team, which is a really great team building event. And it's now here tonight. So thank you very much, James. Over to you. Yeah.
As you can see on the board today, I'm here to talk about how to look after your mental health, and I'll be coming at it from two angles. So how to look after your mental health personally, and also how to set up and create a mentally healthy workplace for the people in the room that have staff, because they've found a healthy and happy staff member is a much more productive staff member. So this program today is kind of going to be focusing on your own mental health, how to look after it, and then also how to create and foster a mentally healthy workplace. That's the two angles we're going to be going for. Now, some of you are probably looking at me right now, and you're probably thinking, this happens pretty regularly, you're probably thinking, what on earth is someone so young doing here on a Tuesday night talking about such a serious topic? Why do we have this young guy? Why don't we have a middle-aged boarding psychologist? No offense to people in the room that might be boarding. But you might be wondering why. You might be wondering, why don't we have someone a bit older talking about such a serious topic? Why do we have this young guy? And the truth is if you're looking at me right now and you're thinking those things, the truth is you're actually right. I actually shouldn't be the person giving this presentation here today. I should actually be my dad. I had this vision that after my dad had recovered from severe depression and anxiety, that he could be a source of inspiration and guidance for millions of people around the world. My dad was an absolutely incredible person. He was always the life of every party. He was a massive family man. He played for Queensland in 3 different sports. He was a successful business owner. In fact, I guarantee if he was still around, he would 100% be at an event like this. This is the kind of situation event he would put himself in. And he was just an absolutely incredible person. Unfortunately, however, throughout my dad's life, he experienced very severe depression and anxiety. And after going in and out of mental health hospitals, after trying treatment option after treatment option, after giving his absolute best, unfortunately about a week or two after I graduated from high school, my dad made the decision to end his own life. And you know what the really sad thing is, and this is why I go into schools and businesses throughout Australia and present, is my dad is just one of millions of people around the world who experience mental illness every single year. And I know that there'll be people in this room right now who've been affected by mental illness, either personally or through a friend or through a loved one. And that's what I think is really sad. After seeing what my dad went through and what our family's gone through, to think there's other people out there going through a similar thing, I think is incredibly tragic and incredibly sad. And I've got a graph I wanted to show you that kind of illustrates this tragedy I'm talking about. Hopefully you're able to see it quite clearly. What this graph shows is the lifetime prevalence or chance of experiencing depression. Now, each of these different color lines, they represent a different generation. So, see this green line here? That represents my grandparents' generation. So people who are roughly 75 or older. And what you'll see is by the time they reach about 70 to 75 years old, 10%, so 1 in 10 people from my grandparents' generation, would have experienced depression once, or at least once throughout their entire life. Which when you think about it, 1 in 10 people experiencing depression at some point throughout a 75-year lifespan, it isn't too bad. But do you know what's really scary? See that red line there? That's our generation. And the current statistic is that by the time that we reach 25 years old, 25%, so 1 in 4 people from our generation have already experienced depression at some point in their life. And you know what's really scary? If things don't change, if we were to continue and extrapolate this red line upwards, it is predicted that by the time the younger generations reach middle age, 50%, so 1 in 2 people from the younger people's generation would have already experienced depression at some point in their life, which I just think is incredibly tragic and incredibly sad. Do you guys know this? Not many people actually know this, but according to the World Health Organization, by 2030, depression is deemed to be the second leading cause of disability worldwide. And you often hear about heart disease, cancer, etc., but by 2030, depression and mental illness is deemed to be the second leading cause of disability worldwide. Now guys, I looked at this graph and I looked it up at the statistics after my dad passed away. And by the way, I'm not going to bore you all with statistics today, but I looked at this graph and the statistics and I went, you know what? This makes absolutely no sense. I mean, antidepressant medication use has actually increased by 300% over the last 20 years. There's more treatment options available for mental illness than there's ever been before. There's more psychologists, there's more psychiatrists, there's more mental health charities. The stigma attached to mental illness is actually the lowest it's ever been. 30 years ago, the stigma attached to mental illness was a lot higher. And yet, for some reason, if you look at this graph, rates of mental illness are increasing with each successive generation. So like, whereas with other illnesses, as we're becoming more medically and technologically advanced, rates of those illnesses are decreasing in prevalence. For some reason, the opposite is occurring with mental illness. And I looked at this and went like, this makes no sense. Like, what's going on? Like, how can this be? And the reason this is occurring, it's actually relatively simple. Basically, the lifestyles we are leading, they go against and they're not in tune with how we've biologically evolved and adapted to live. So what I mean by that is like the lifestyles majority of us are currently living is on how our brains and our bodies have genetically and biologically evolved to be living. So you're probably wondering like, okay, James, well, like, how have we biologically evolved and adapted to live? Well, did you guys know that 99.99% of human existence on Earth was actually spent as hunter-gatherers? So that basically meant that the guys go out and hunt for animals and the women go collect berries and fruits, etc. And that's how we lived for tens of thousands of years. Now, the lifestyles of these hunter-gatherers, what it entailed was basically, we're all hunter-gatherers in these small tribes. It was about 200 to 400 people. And as a result, we were constantly surrounded by friends and loved ones. We used to always do like, activities together. We were constantly socially interacting. We used to exercise on average for about 6 to 7 hours every single day. So either hunting for animals, collecting berries or fruits, moving from place to place. As a result, we used to spend about 7 to 8 hours outside in the sun every single day. We didn't have electricity, so when it got dark, that was our cue to go to sleep. And when the sun came up, that was our cue to wake up. On average, it's estimated that hunter-gatherers used to get about 11 hours of sleep a night. Our diets were in balance, in particular omega-3 and omega-6s. So we weren't highly concentrated with omega-6s, which come from your starches and your processed foods, but we actually had a much more balanced diet in our bodies with omega-3 and omega-6s. And above all, and this is probably the most important one, stresses were dealt with as a collective. So like, either the tribe succeeded or the tribe failed, but it wasn't this internal competitive environment. Now, having listened to that lifestyle that we lived for tens of thousands of years, just put your hand up right now if you reckon it's like a bit of a difference between that lifestyle and the lifestyle majority of us are currently living. Do we even need to put our hands up? Probably not. And so it's this mismatch between the lifestyles the majority of us are currently living and the lifestyles we're still biologically evolved and adapted to be living that's resulting in this epidemic of mental illness. So we can keep churning out more and more antidepressant medications. We can keep having more treatment options, more psychologists, more psychiatrists, more mental health charities raising awareness. But until we as a society start to address our lifestyles and start to live mentally healthy lifestyles that are conducive to how we've biologically evolved and adapted to live, rates of mental illness are just going to continue to increase. Now, maybe in like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 years' time, we as humans would have biologically evolved and adapted to get 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, to barely ever exercise, to spend most of our days just indoors, to have out-of-balance diets, to always be stressed, to be relatively socially isolated. Maybe in like 4,000 or 5,000 years' time, we as humans would have biologically evolved and adapted to that lifestyle. But the brutal truth is, and if you can remember from like biology classes back in high school, it takes animals thousands and thousands of years to adapt to something. And the brutal truth is we haven't yet biologically evolved and adapted to the lifestyles that we've been living for the last tens of thousands of years. We're still biologically evolved, adapted to that lifestyle. We haven't yet adapted to the lifestyles we've been living for probably the last 50 to 100 years. And so it's this mismatch, I know I'm hammering it home, between the lifestyles we're biologically evolved to be living, this hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and the lifestyles the majority of us are currently living that's resulting in this epidemic of mental illness. Now, you guys are pretty smart. You look pretty smart. I'm a bit intimidated right now. You guys look pretty smart. You've probably already worked out the solution by now, and that's the reason I'm here today for the next hour and a half delivering this program. The solution to this problem is actually incredibly simple and incredibly effective. We just need to make small lifestyle changes that bring our lifestyles closer to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle we're still biologically evolved and adapted to be living. Now, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. This is a bit of evidence to support what I was talking about before. These two people here, they're members of the Kululi tribe. Now, this is fascinating. The Kululi tribe, they're one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer tribes in the entire world, and they live in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Now, about 16 years ago, researchers went in and they conducted intense psychological tests on every single member of the 2,000-person Kululi tribe. By the way, the Kululi tribe live an absolutely brutal existence. Like, we're talking average lifespans about 50 years old, infant mortality rates are 50%. Like, there's literally stories of guys getting speared by boars and dying from that. Like, it's a brutal, harsh lifestyle, but they're one of the only tribes in the world that still live a pure hunter-gatherer existence that we used to live in the previous like 20, 30, 40,000 years. And when they went into this tribe and they measured how many people had mental illness and they did psychological tests on every single person of the 2,000 member Kululi tribe, have a guess, we'll make this a bit interactive. Out of 2,000 people, how many do you think were found to be experiencing some kind of mental illness? Have a guess. Zero, that's correct. You've heard this presentation before, that's cheating. So zero, so out of 2,000 people, not one was found to be experiencing mental illness. Now sales do the same thing, right? Like sales to go out into the Australian populace right now, and I reckon we probably live in one of the nicest countries in the world. If I was to grab 2,000 people from the Australian populace right now, once again, guessing game, out of 2,000 people, you guys have heard this presentation before, you got to get this. Out of 2,000 people, how many do you think would be found to be experiencing some kind of mental illness currently in Australia? You want to answer? 100? 100%. It's out of 2,000 people, it'd be about 400. Currently in Australia, about 20% of people are experiencing some kind of mental illness, whether it's anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, etc. And so what this shows is the mismatch between the lifestyles that we're currently living and the lifestyles we're still biologically evolved to be living that's resulting in this epidemic of mental illness. And that brings me to the solution, which is making these small changes to our lifestyles that bring us closer to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. By the way, before you get like super excited and stuff, I'm not going to ask you all to like script off and like grab that bag when you go hunting for berries. We're not going that far back. Don't get excited. Some people here were getting a little bit excited. I'm looking at you two guys. So we're not going that far back. We're just going to make really small changes to our lifestyles that bring them closer to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle we're biologically evolved to be living. And this stuff that I'm going to teach in the next 50 minutes to an hour or so, these little tips and tricks and changes that you can make in your lifestyle, they're pretty practical, they're pretty simple, they're not very complicated. And what I want to do is if at any point while I'm going through these and talking about them, if at any point you've got a question or a query or anything, feel free to put your hand up or interject. We've got like a nice small intimate group and I'll address your question because I want to make this nice and interactive and I don't want you guys having any queries or questions. So let's get into it. Let's go into these lifestyle changes to improve your mental health and also to help your staff or in your business. Number one, and this is probably the most important one. I often get people coming up to me in the street, which is a bit weird. Like it's a bit weird. But sometimes people come to me in the street and they go, "Oh, James, like, what's your number one piece of advice on how to look after my mental health? Like, what's the number one key thing?" And if I had to give you any piece of advice on how to look after your own mental health or how to look after your staff's mental health to improve productivity and happiness of your staff, it's the following lifestyle choice. And the first lifestyle choice is to reduce and manage your stress levels. Have any of you guys heard of the fight or flight response before? The fight or flight response? Okay, some people have, some people haven't. So for those in the room that haven't heard of the fight or flight response, it was a biological response that developed when we were hunter-gatherers. So say for some like weird reason, like an elephant was to like, with its little trunk, slowly open that door and just charge at me right now. What it does is it prepares our bodies to either fight the animal or to run away from it. Now, I think majority of people in this room would know a couple of the chemicals that are triggered when the fight or flight response occurs. The one that most people have heard of is called adrenaline. And it prepares you to either fight the animal or to run away from it. Now, I reckon probably majority of you in this room have experienced the fight or flight response before. I mean, if you've ever been in a fight, that's a good example of fight or flight response being triggered. You become a lot more alert, your reflexes increase, your strength actually increases by about 25%. Another one is like, you know when you're trying to get to sleep at night? And you hear like a little sound, you're like, oh, robber. And all of a sudden, like you tense up, you freak out, you come up with your like escape discovery plan. That's the fight or flight response being triggered. Now, this is the key thing. The fight or flight response, it evolved to be triggered in short doses of about 30 seconds to a minute. Because when we're hunter-gatherers, that's how long it would take us to like either fight that saber-toothed tiger or to run away from it. So in the short term, our bodies, we can flush out the 26 different chemicals that are triggered during the fight or flight response, the main one being adrenaline. And as a result, we can flush them out and normally we're fine. But in the long term, when the fight or flight response is triggered for a prolonged period of time, which in layman's terms basically means you're under a prolonged period of stress. That's basically what it means. Our brains and our bodies, we can't actually flush out those 26 different chemicals and hormones. And what it does is it begins to change the neurochemical balance in our brain. And by the way, that's what mental illness is. Mental illness is a neurochemical imbalance in the brain. That's actually what happened with my dad. He was struggling to keep our business afloat, so we didn't go bankrupt for about 8 years. And he was working literally 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, to the extent that I remember at one point, like he bought a bed to go in his office so he could wake up and keep working. And it was that prolonged period of stress that ultimately led to him getting very severe depression and anxiety. And study after study over the last 20 years has basically conclusively proven that the predominant cause of mental illness is prolonged periods of stress. So what I'm going to do now, particularly because this has been quite a stressful year due to COVID, what I'm going to do right now is provide you guys with 3 really simple stress management techniques you can employ in your own life to look after your own mental health and to manage your stress levels, and also just a couple of strategies that you can employ with your staff or in your workplace to help manage and reduce the stress levels of the people you work with. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number one is just to break up your stress levels. So prolonged periods of stress are bad, right? That's what we want to avoid. That's what begins to change the neurochemicals in our brain if it goes for too long a period of time. So number one is just to break up your stress levels. And it's quite simple. What I recommend is whenever you notice yourself feeling stressed for about 1 to 2 hours, straight away stop whatever it is you're doing and go and do something that you know works personally for you to lower and reduce your stress levels. So like for me personally, it's sport. So like when I get stressed, I'll go play some kind of sport. For some people in this room, it might be walking a dog. For some people, it might be reading. For some people, it might be playing piano. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you know that it works personally for you to lower and reduce your stress levels. And every person in this room is different, so what's going to work for one person won't necessarily work for another person. It's got to be what works for you. But the key strategy with this, and I'll explain it with my hands, what you're basically doing is instead of being constantly stressed like this, what you do is you get stressed, you recognize you're stressed and that long term this isn't good for your mental health. You go into a stress relieving activity, even if it's only for 5 to 10 minutes. You get stressed again, you go and do a stress relieving activity. And this is so much better for your mental health than being constantly stressed. And by the way, when it comes to giving yourself stress breaks throughout the day, they don't have to be long. It doesn't have to be like a 30 minutes, like an hour stress break. Simply like 5 to 10 minute breaks intermittently throughout the workday is super effective at lowering the cortisol and the adrenaline within your bloodstream that is triggered during the stress response. So just breaking up your stress levels, being constantly aware. In my own life, this is the one I'm very, very aware of and cognizant of at all times. I'm constantly judging my stress levels, how stressed am I feeling at the moment, and I'll consistently throughout the day give myself stress breaks, often every 30 minutes to an hour. So same thing in your workplace. If you've got staff members, encourage small little stress breaks, maybe even set up a place outside. We were talking about this at EC Connect when I came and presented here. I think you were thinking about actually having a place outside where the staff can go, there's like a bench outside to have a bit of a break for 5 to 10 minutes. Setting that up and encouraging short stress breaks, it won't actually have, like a lot of people often think they'll have an inadvertent and detrimental effect on staff productivity, but those short little breaks will improve staff productivity, it'll improve their awareness, their happiness levels, etc. So encourage small little stress breaks in the workplace and in your own life. All right, number 2, second little strategy, don't stress about things that are outside of your control. A good example I like to use of this is, say for example, you're on a flight, which I guess it's a bad example right now because we're not going to be going on any flights soon. But say, for example, you're on a flight. There's no point stressing the entire time you're on a flight that it's going to crash or go missing, etc., because it's outside of your control. Like, if something is outside of your control, there's absolutely no point stressing about it. And yet, I see this all the time. I see it in schools, I see it in businesses, I see it at conferences where I present. People stress about things that are outside of their control. And one of the most important things you can learn to do to look after your mental health is to recognize the following. Okay. These are the things I can control in my life, and these are the things I can't control. And it doesn't matter how much I stress about these things, if I can't change this situation or change this result, there's absolutely no point stressing about it. All it's doing is triggering that fight or flight response. And the best way, and what I often recommend people to do with this second one, is just to consistently ask yourself the following question. Whenever something happens to you, particularly if it's a bad or negative life event, ask yourself, can I control this situation? Can I control this situation? And if you can't control the situation, there is absolutely no point stressing about it because stress is the enemy of good mental health. That's the enemy. So if you're constantly stressing about things that you can't control, stressing about it's not going to change it because you've got no control over it. And all you're doing is negatively impacting or impeding your mental health. So constantly ask yourself, can I control this? Can I not control this? This is one of the basis of the philosophy of Stoicism. It's all about learning what you can and can't control. And it's a really important tactic to employ for your mental health. And also, once again, back to the workplace, because it's like an entrepreneur event. When you've got staff, if you've got staff and you're talking with them, constantly ask them if they're stressed. All right, we're looking at this problem. What are the aspects of this that you can control? And then focus on addressing those aspects with the staff member that you're working with. Really encourage a company culture where you focus on the things you can't control and the things that are outside of your control you don't stress about. This has become particularly important during COVID times because there's a lot of things that businesses can't currently control. So instead of focusing energies on that, focus on the things you can control and try to go down that avenue in the business and the workplace. And the final little one, and this one's pretty simple. Just minimize your time around people and situations that consistently cause you stress. They've done a lot of studies on this. They found that nearly every single time, they can trace mental illness back to 2 things. Number 1, the person's in a situation where every single day they're consistently stressed. So they're in a workplace, they're in a relationship, they're in something that's consistently causing them stress day after day, or there's been like a major life event, whether it's a divorce, bankruptcy, someone's passed away in the family, that's caused that person a prolonged period of stress after it. Nearly every single time they can trace it back to one of those 2 things. And so the third one is just learning to minimize your time around people and situations that consistently cause you stress. So if there's like certain people in your life that every time you're around that person or you're in that situation, it makes you feel anxious or uptight or stressed, That's not good for your mental health. Now, obviously, I understand that there's certain people in your life you can't completely avoid if they're causing you a bit of stress, etc. But if they are, just try to minimize your time around those people, even if it's like a 30-minute break, as much as you possibly can, because that consistent stress in situations every single day is very detrimental to your mental health. So these are the three quite simple stress management techniques that we suggest employing to reduce and manage your stress levels. What I'd like to do now is maybe just turn to the person on the left or right of you and just like quickly 2 minutes while I get a drink of water, just explain to them which of these three, just pick one, which of these three you're going to try to employ into your life or into your workplace with your staff members. Just pick out the one that you think is most applicable or important or useful for yourself. I'll give you guys like 1 minute. I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. Just have a chat. Hey.
Is that remote working? I think right next to the computer, so a button I click on.
Oh, so I don't have to keep walking back and forth. Oh, okay. Oh, there is. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh. Is he, like, when I'm walking, is he able to capture it? All right, so I don't need to stay stationary because I'm moving quite a lot.
No, he's switching between those two cameras and that screen.
Oh, good.
So sometimes it just shows screen, other times it shows the room and cameras.
Oh, awesome. I was just wondering what I was presenting. Yeah.
But it is, and I think it's just managing it, you know, and I think sometimes because everything else is on it.
All right, excellent. I'll get back into it. One thing I do want to say that I forgot to mention is, like, short periods of stress are fine. It's a normal everyday part of life. We're all going to experience it. It's not stress that's the enemy. Stress sometimes in certain situations is actually quite good for you, but it's the prolonged period of stress that's the enemy. And so it's like a really important delineation to make. Often people think I'm saying like no stress, like you don't want any stress in your life. Short periods of stress are fine. It's when the stress is going on for weeks, months, years, that's when it's detrimental. And one last thing I want to say, just as a kind of like a comment or critique that I have, is I've noticed within the entrepreneur community, working really hard and being incredibly stressed is now kind of worn as a badge of honor. And people will often be like, when you ask someone, you might be able to relate to this, "Hey, how's it going?" 99% of the time, particularly in the business community between entrepreneurs, "Oh, I'm so busy. I'm so stressed. I've got so much going on." Because it's not like a badge of honor, like I'm so busy because I'm a very important person. I've got very important things to do, so I'm very busy. And one of the most important things I would like to emphasize is being stressed for a prolonged period of time, it should be frowned upon. It should have the opposite reaction. Instead of looking up and admiring people that live a lifestyle that makes them incredibly stressed, where they're always working all the time, that isn't what we should be aiming for, particularly if you want optimal mental health. So a little bit of a critique that I have about the entrepreneur community, often people pride themselves on not getting much sleep and being incredibly stressed and working very hard, and that's not necessarily good for your mental health. So just like a little bit of a comment I wanted to make. Now the second lifestyle choice we'll be talking about today, if you look up at the board, is to aerobically exercise for at least 15 minutes each day. Now who here reckons, and I just want to get like a bit of a show of hands, who here reckons currently they're getting at least 15 minutes of aerobic exercise each day? Just chuck your hand up. Oh, very well done. That's definitely a start. So looking around the room, I think about 50% of you just put your hands up just then. Now, we obviously all know that exercise is good for our bodies, right? I would contend that physical exercise is even more important and beneficial for our mental health. And studies over the last 20 years have conclusively proven that. I'll tell you about one of the most interesting ones, the ones I find fascinating. They got this group of people, and they told one group of people, "I want you to exercise 30 minutes 3 times a week." And normally the exercise they were encouraged to do was fast walking. So 30 minutes 3 times a week, fast walking. And the other group was told they're going to take an antidepressant medication. It was the most common antidepressant medication at the time. Now, in the short term, the medication and the aerobic exercise of walking, they came out about equal in effectiveness. But in the long term, exercise came out as being more beneficial. And the reason for this is exercise, you've probably heard of it, it releases this thing called endorphins. It also releases dopamine and serotonin, which is kind of like the body's feel-good happy chemicals. That's why generally after finishing exercising, you'll feel an increase in your energy and mood. It's because it's released these happy chemicals into the brain. The thing is, if you look up at the board, what's recommended, and the reason I've got it up on the screen, is 15 minutes of aerobic exercise every single day. Now, for those of you in the room that aren't aware of what type of exercise aerobic exercise is, aerobic exercise is any type of exercise that gets your heart rate up to a level where it's kind of difficult to hold a conversation. So if you're like, that's a bit weird. Yeah, it was a bit weird. So if you're breathing like that, that's aerobic exercise. I don't want to give you guys like a heart rate zone that you have to be in for it to be considered aerobic exercise. The general test is if you're struggling to hold a conversation with someone, that's the type of exercise that's been found to have an antidepressant effect. So if you're listening right now and you're thinking, oh, like James, like, I walk 15 minutes at this speed every single day, does that count? That does not count. The type of exercise has an antidepressant effect. It has to be a bit more strenuous than that. It has to get your heart rate up. And so it's 15 minutes of aerobic exercise that's been found to have an antidepressant effect. Now, 15 minutes of aerobic exercise, it's not hard. There's no real excuse why you can't get 15 minutes of aerobic exercise each day. Our recommendations that I like to put forth are basically the following. You want to make sure it's aerobic, but the second thing you want to do is you want to make sure it's a form of exercise that you enjoy doing. So if it's something you hate doing, if you're one of those people that's like hates running, don't start running, because I guarantee within 2 to 3 days you will not be doing 15 minutes of running every single day. So the second step is you want to make sure it's a form of exercise that you enjoy doing. So if you enjoy boxing, join a boxing class, get a boxing bag in your house. If you're one of those people that likes like listen to music and like skip or do like some kind of exercise during the ads on TV, do that. If you're one of those people that loves swimming or cycling or basketball, whatever it is, pick 1 to 2 forms of exercise that you enjoy doing that gets your heart rate up 15 minutes each day. And the final little piece of advice is exercise at the same time each day. You want to get your body into a routine and a rhythm, and one of the biggest facets of this program that I deliver, it's all about habit formation. That's the key when it comes to your lifestyle, is building these sustainable, positive habits, and the easy way to do that is to do things at the same time each day. So these are the 3 steps. Do an aerobic activity or sport, does it get your heart rate up for 15 minutes? Make sure it's something that you enjoy doing, and then exercise at the same time each day. Normally it's a choice between morning before work or after work. I personally like to work in the exercise in the afternoons. Some people are early morning people and they like to exercise in the morning. Just do whatever works for you. It's a personal choice. But the key thing is do some kind of aerobic exercise. And I'm really passionate about this one. I'll tell you about something quite interesting. So the last 7 or 8 years doing this, I've worked with thousands of young people in particular who are experiencing depression or anxiety. And the first thing we get them to do at the charity I run called Breaking Free, the first thing we get them to do is to aerobically exercise for 15 minutes each day. The first thing, we sit down with someone who's got anxiety or depression, the first thing we work out is when they're going to start to exercise, what form of exercise is going to be, and at what time. And sometimes we'll even get one of our staff members to start exercising with that person to get them in that routine. But that is how beneficial exercise is. It's one of the most positive things you can possibly do for your mental health. And I know no one in this room right now wants to experience a mental illness. One of the best habits you can get into starting now is to simply exercise 15 minutes each day consistently, reduce your chance of getting mental illness. It's good for your mental health, and it just makes you a happier person in general. So for the 50% of you that didn't put your hands up just then, I've got a bit of a challenge for you. Now, I can't really, normally I say like start exercising today. You don't have to, it's late at night, you don't have to go home after this and start exercising. But starting tomorrow, pick some form of activity, do it for 15 minutes each day, try to do it for just 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I guarantee if you do it for 2 weeks, you'll notice an improvement in your energy and your mood. I'm that confident. If you're not exercising and you make that shift, you'll notice a difference in how you feel. So that's a bit of a challenge I like to issue. I love challenges. That's why I'm going to issue them. I might issue a few more throughout this. Now, the third little lifestyle choice I'm going to be talking about today, and I always like to see people's reaction to this one. The third lifestyle choice is to sleep for at least 8 hours each night. Now, who here, based on that reaction, it sounds like you're getting 9 hours of sleep a night. So who here reckons that they're currently getting at least 8 hours of sleep, let's say at least 4 or 5 nights a week. So 1 or 2 nights a week you might get 5 or 6, but most of the time you get about 8 hours of sleep. Just put your hands up. All right. Once again, we've got about a 50-50 split. Now, I don't want to scare you guys, but based on that hand showing, I'm going to, because I think it's necessary. They've actually found that 8 hours is kind of the minimum cutoff. Like roughly around 8 hours is the minimum cutoff. And what I mean by that is when you're getting like 8 hours of sleep a night, your chance of experiencing mental illness statistically stay relatively low. As soon as you start to consistently have 6, 5, 4 hours of sleep consistently every single night, your chances of experiencing a mental illness begin to skyrocket. The thing after prolonged periods of stress that has the highest correlation with mental illness is lack of sleep and insomnia. There's a huge link between the two. Now the thing is, when it comes to sleep, the reason it's so important, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to keep it super simple. The whole purpose of sleep is to rest and recover our minds. And if we're not resting and recovering our minds for long enough, it's going to get sick just like any other part of the body. And you might find this interesting. I do most of my work in high schools. The average amount of sleep that a Queensland high school student is currently getting is about 6 hours and 15, 6 hours and 20 minutes. And that's about, an hour and 40 minutes below what's recommended. And I think that same, about 6 hours and 15 minutes, would be probably pretty similar in the workforce, and particularly for people who are CEOs or in positions of leadership, they probably sleep even less. So consistently within society at the moment, I think we as a populace and as a society are quite sleep deprived, and I think it's having a major contributing factor when it comes to mental illness. So with this sleeping 8 hours a night, I'm not being all doom and gloom, so I'm not saying that if you don't get 8 hours of sleep every night for the rest of your life, that you're doomed. I'm not saying that at all. This is important. If you get 8 hours of sleep, like 4 or 5 nights a week, and then 1 or 2 nights a week you get 5 or 6 hours of sleep, that's okay. So say for example, you got an important meeting on a Friday and you stay up 2 o'clock preparing for it, but then on Saturday and Sunday you get 8 hours of sleep, that's okay. When it comes to sleep, it's what you get consistently over a period of time. Studies show it's what occurs over the course of a 10-day period that impacts how you feel mentally. So if you get 1 bad night's sleep, don't start stressing like, oh no, I saw that presentation, this means it's like the end. It's not the case. It's what you get consistently over a period of time. And to help you get 8 hours of sleep, for the people in the room, and I'm assuming there probably would be a few people in this room that might struggle getting 8 hours of sleep or getting to sleep or staying asleep, a little bit of sleep hygiene piece of advice for you guys. Number 1, you want to go to bed and wake up at roughly the same time each day. So it's very important to get our bodies in a circadian rhythm or a routine. And so if you're one of those people that wakes up at 7 o'clock on the weekdays, but on the weekends you wake up at 11 or 12 in the day, your body's quite out of routine. It's not in a circadian rhythm or routine. So as much as you can, try to wake up and go to bed at roughly the same time each day. It doesn't have to be exact, but if you're like thereabouts, that's normally what's recommended. Number 2, turn off all electronic devices 30 minutes before you go to sleep. Now this is one I think a lot of people, including myself sometimes, is a bit guilty of. What they've found is when you're on an electronic device before you go to bed, it emanates this thing called blue light. Now when we're hunter-gatherers, we didn't have electricity. So when the sun went down and it got dark, that was our cue to go to sleep. What happens in our prehistoric brains is when we're looking at a screen or a device like an iPad, a phone, a computer, right before we go to bed, our brain interprets that blue light as sunlight. And as a result, it makes it very difficult to get to sleep. So if you're one of those people in the room right now who currently struggle to get to sleep, but you're on your laptop or on your phone right up to the moment you turn the lights off, that is often a contributing reason or a factor. And so one of the first things I recommend for people who struggle to get sleep, turn off all electronic devices 30 minutes before you go to bed, dull the lighting in your room, read, talk to your partner, talk to someone on the phone, do some artwork, do some kind of activity. The one I normally recommend is reading, that doesn't involve an electronic device. And finally, little one, this is a little tip. I don't know if, I'll be impressed if anyone knew this one. If you've got really bad sleep difficulties, the first thing you should do when you wake up in the morning is to walk outside in the sun. It is the first thing you should do for the exact same reason I talked about, like I just mentioned before. When you go outside in the sun in the morning, it tells our prehistoric brains it's sunny, time to wake up. As a result, it helps you to actually wake up. Your brain becomes more alert. And because you wake up earlier in the day, you get tired earlier at night. So this is a really simple one. It only takes about 2 minutes for the eyes to interpret the sunlight and for our brains to wake up and realize it's daylight. And as a result, helps us wake up earlier and we get tired earlier at night. So this is a little bit of a tip. What I normally do is I have my glass of water in the morning outside in the sun. I literally go to the kitchen, glass of water, drink it outside in the sun, takes about 2 minutes, that's enough. 2 minutes is all it needs. Have your breakfast outside in the sun, read the newspaper outside in the sun, get sunlight as early as possible in the morning, it helps you get better sleep at night. So there's a little piece of advice when it comes to sleep. Once again, I can't stress this one enough. Of all the things I talk about in this program, I think this is the one that people in society currently are doing the least of. So please don't sacrifice your sleep for work, study, whatever it is. Make sure to prioritize sleep because it leads to better performance, mental health, etc. Also, once again, bring it back to the workplace. If you've got staff, constantly ask, and we were talking about this in the presentation, constantly ask and be aware of how tired the people in your group are. Don't be afraid to ask, like, how have you been sleeping? What kind of sleep quality have you been getting? Are you not getting much sleep because you're stressed? Because having staff members that are like not sleep deprived is much better for your business than having a whole bunch of zombies walking around not even knowing where they are. So try to emphasize sleep as much as possible and get roughly 8 hours of sleep every single night. Now, the next one, I'll be pretty impressed if anyone knew this one. The fourth lifestyle choice is to get at least 30 minutes of sunlight each day. Now, did anyone here know that sunlight has one of the fastest known antidepressant effects of anything. And you might be thinking, like, James, what on earth are you talking about? But like, think about your own life. You know when it's been a rainy, overcast couple of days and you're cooped up inside and you go outside in the sun? Generally within a couple of minutes, you'll feel an increase in your energy and mood. Get this right, in Europe, every single winter, ever since they started recording mental health statistics in the early 1970s, every single winter, rates of mental illness increased by 25% simply because of a lack of sunlight. It's called seasonal affective disorder, acronym SAD. And literally what happens is people become more sad in winter because of a lack of sunlight. Now, the reason sunlight is so important and vital for our mental health is because it gives us this thing you've probably heard of called vitamin D, which actually isn't a vitamin. It's a hormone that's really important to the effective regulation of chemicals in our brain. And we as human beings, we need a certain amount of the hormone vitamin D in our brain each day in order to keep all the brains, not all the brains, all the neurons and axons within our brain firing correctly. We all need a certain amount of sunlight. And the good news, what they found is because we live in southeast Queensland, we've got quite high UV rays. The amount of sunlight roughly that we need to get a sufficient amount so we don't have a vitamin D deficiency and to look after our mental health is 30 minutes of sunlight each day. Which I don't think is too much. Looking around this room right now, you guys are relatively tanned. I think probably majority of you are getting like 30 minutes of sunlight each day. For those of you that aren't, a couple of little pieces of advice. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's not rocket science, but things you normally do inside, do them outside in the sun. This was a big one we talked about at EC Connect a couple of months ago, is encouraging when you're on your morning tea or your lunch break, make sure you spend that time outside in the sun. Don't spend your entire day indoors working inside on a computer. Encourage time to go outside and have your breaks outside. And it's a pretty easy thing to do. If you're running a business or you do have staff, try to set up a place in your workplace where people can have their lunch or morning tea outside in the sun, because it's a great way to get the sunlight. It's only 30 minutes. Most lunchtime morning tea breaks around 30 minutes. So things you normally do inside, do outside in the sun. If you're one of those people that's always on the phone, occasionally take phone calls outside in the sun. Just go for a walk outside and take a phone call outside in the sun. If you always read inside, read outside in the sun. If you always work out and go to the gym inside, occasionally work out and do something outdoors in the sun. But just basically things you normally do inside, do them outside in the sun. And the last little piece of advice, and people often tell me that they find like this is like the most important or useful thing they get throughout the entire program, and it's the following. When you're feeling sad or down or stressed, don't stay inside, go outside in the sun. What people with depression and anxiety often do is they'll hide away inside when they're feeling down or low, and they won't want to leave their bedroom or their room. And that is the worst possible thing that you can do for your mental health when you're feeling down or low. The worst thing you can do is stay isolated inside by yourself. Worst possible thing. The best thing you can do when you're feeling down or low is to go outside in the sun. Immediately go outside in the sun, a quick walk, whatever it is. A little bit of advice, if you're ever going to fire someone, fire them outside in the sun. It'll make it a little bit easier. So like literally, next time, I don't know if you guys have employed that one yet, but a little bit of advice. Oh yeah, if you're gonna break up with someone, break out with them outside in the sun. But literally guys, like next time you're inside crying, don't cry inside, cry outside in the sun. Plus, it'll evaporate your tears, which is quite nice. So guys, use sunlight to your advantage. The last thing I'll say on this one, and it might sound a bit corny, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. The way I've used sunlight, it's kind of like this thing you have in your back pocket, and when you're feeling a bit down or low, you take out a bit of sunshine, you sprinkle it on yourself, and you feel a bit better. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So guys, we've got a lot of sunlight in southeast Queensland. We're very lucky. Use sunlight to your advantage to improve your mood, and just make sure you're getting about 30 minutes each day. By the way, the difference in your mental health from 30 minutes to 4 hours in the sun, it's negligible. There's barely any difference. What basically matters is you want to be getting a sufficient amount of vitamin D to keep everything in your brain working correctly. That's about 30 minutes. So it's not that much. So don't think, oh, the more sunlight I get, like the better my mental health will be. No, it doesn't work like that. Like if you're going 10 hours of sun a day, you're probably heading towards the cancerous direction rather than the positive mental health direction. So yeah, make sure you're prioritizing your sunlight as much as you can. And on that, we're having a little break. Just turn to the person on the left or right of you. Just pick the person with the smallest ears. And I want you to, I don't know, I just like to amuse myself when I'm presenting. But just turn to someone on your left or right and explain to them how you're going to get 30 minutes of sunlight each day if you're currently not, or what's your techniques or tactics. And if once you've done that, also explain how you're going to try to get 30 minutes, or encourage people in your workplace to get 30 minutes of sunlight each day. I'll give you guys 1 minute. I'm just going to quickly get a cupcake.
It was interesting because Matt's got a very garish top with about mental health
All right. Number 5. So the fifth lifestyle choice, if you look up at the screen, the fifth lifestyle choice is to socially interact as often as possible. So when we're hunter-gatherers, right, we're in these small tribes of about 200 to 300 people. As a result, we as human beings, we've evolved to be a very social species. So like, if you're listening to me right now and you're thinking like, oh, like James, that you don't understand, I hate people. You don't. Like, biologically, we're actually required to need people. Have a think about this, right? What's the highest form of punishment that we give criminals when they've been like a bit naughty in jail? Yeah, solitary confinement. The thing that scares these big, tough criminals more than anything is to be socially isolated and prevented from spending time around other people. And so what they've found is we as humans, we all need social interaction. It's incredibly important for our mental health. The thing is though, if you look up at the board, I can't really tell you guys how much to socially interact each day. Like, first of all, it'd be a bit weird if I was like, talk to 10 guys for 7 minutes each day and like 8 girls for 9 minutes. It'd be a bit weird and controlling. And also, the thing is, every single person in this room, we're all different. So some people in this room right now would be quite introverted, which means after being around people for a while, you need time to be by yourself to recover and recuperate energy. Some people in this room would be quite extroverted, which means when you're around people, that's where you get your energy. You get energy from people. But the key point I want to make for every single person in this room is we all need people and we all need social interaction. And you know how before I was talking about how there's a huge correlation between lack of sleep and mental illness? Another one that has a huge correlation is social isolation and mental illness. People that are more socially isolated are a much higher risk factor of experiencing mental illness going forward because it's so good for our mental health. I'll tell you about something quite interesting. I find this fascinating. The longest study ever conducted on human happiness, it was done by Harvard University, and it followed these people, these guys, it was like 800 of them, from the age of 5 until they basically died. I think there's like 4 left, the 4 survivors. But anyway, they followed them throughout their entire life, and they found the biggest predictor of a human being's happiness was the number and the quality of their social relationships. It wasn't how much money they earned, how successful they were, it was the number and the quality of their social relationships. That is normally the biggest factor that dictates our happiness as human beings. And unfortunately what's happening is we as a society are becoming less social than we ever have been before. And what I mean by that is we're interacting one-on-one in person with other people less than we ever have in human existence. And I think it's having a catastrophic result when it comes to mental illness, is that lack of face-to-face, in-person communication. The fact that it's reducing, I think, is quite detrimental. Now, because I can't tell you guys like how much to socially interact each day, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you with a couple of really simple pieces of advice to help with the social interaction element. Number 1, join community, sporting or community cultural groups in your community where you're going to be forced to be around people and to socially interact. So if you're a part of a sports team, a church, a community group, a volunteer organization, whenever you put yourself in situations where you're going to be forced to interact, that's fantastic. And also, if you don't even feel like interacting or talking to people that day, simply being around other human beings has been found to have a buffering effect when it comes to your mental health. It's incredible, but just simply being around, not even interacting, is positive for your mental health. So if you're currently not like joining a community group or a sporting group or a volunteer group, would really recommend just incorporating 1 or 2 of those activities into your weekly schedule. Just increases that the social interaction. Number 2, dedicate time to helping other people. They found that we as human beings find helping people inherently rewarding. So a really good way to socially interact is spend your time helping other people. There's heaps of volunteer organizations that you can join. A couple of the ones that I would recommend, there's Surfing for the Disabled on the Gold Coast, that's a really good one. Orange Sky Laundry, you can do like a shift a week for 2 hours helping homeless people with their laundry. There's lots of different ones out there, I can talk to you afterwards, but I really am a passionate advocate for dedicating your time to helping other people. And then finally, there's a bit of an acronym, and I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but there's a bit of an acronym. I can't tell you guys how much to socially interact, so this is what I recommend. It starts with two letters, and it's PP, prioritize people. And what I mean by that is whenever you have a choice between 2 activities, one that involves people and one that doesn't, always pick the activity that involves people. So say, for example, this weekend, a friend goes, oh, do you want to go for a surf down at Burleigh? Or you can like stay home and watch TV. Like go for a surf with your friend down at Burleigh. Say, for example, your partner goes, oh, do you want to go shopping today? Or you can like just stay home and like scroll through YouTube or on the internet. Go shopping with your partner. always pick an activity or the activities in your life that involve other people. And like personally for me, this prioritizing people, it might occur like once a week. Like once a week I have a choice between two activities, one that involves people, one that doesn't. I will always prioritize the activity that involves people. It's a really simple habit to get into your life, but just simply remember, prioritize people, prioritize people, prioritize people. We're going to get our happiness in life from people. We're not going to get it from objects and technology. So PP, prioritize people. Number 6 is when having negative thoughts, do an engaging activity. Have any of you guys heard of the term, and you guys would have definitely heard of it, have any of you guys ever heard of the term rumination before? Okay, well, I'll tell you what it is then. Rumination in psychology is where you have the same negative reoccurring thought for 20 minutes or more. Now, can anyone guess why periods of consistent negative reoccurring thoughts, so stuff like, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, that kind of thing. Can anyone guess, based on this presentation what I've talked about, why periods of consistent negative thoughts would be so bad for a person's mental health? What do you think it causes? Round of applause, little golf clap, little golf clap. That's 100% correct, that's 100% correct. What happens is when you're having consistent periods of negative thoughts, those thoughts are triggering the fight or flight response we talked about 25, 30 minutes ago. So when you're having these negative reoccurring thoughts, it's triggering that fight or flight response that in the long run is so bad and detrimental to your mental health and begins to change the neurochemistry in our brains. That's why there's a huge correlation between rumination and people with depression. About 90% of people who have depression report they have periods of rumination every day, so 20 minutes of the same negative reoccurring thought. There's a huge correlation between the two, and it's because your thoughts can cause you stress. So if you're listening to me right now and you've had a really bad life event happen to you, and you think about that event again and again and again and again, the same biological response that occurred at the time of that event is occurring again within your bloodstream, and you're triggering that fight or flight response. So before I teach you guys the most effective known strategy to help you deal with consistent negative thoughts, it's important to realize one thing, and it's the following. You can't actually think yourself out of thinking about something. It's impossible. So say, for example, I go, stop thinking about that trendy wall, stop thinking about that trendy wall, stop thinking about that trendy wall. I'm now thinking about that trendy wall and who painted it and where it came from, and I'm actually curious, I'll ask you later. But I'm thinking about this trendy wall, right? Like, you can't actually think yourself out of thinking about something, because to think yourself out of thinking about something, you got to think about the thing you don't want to think about, which causes you to think about it. So this is a common misconception, but it's really important when it comes to mental health. If you've got depression or you're feeling down or low, you can't simply go, stop being sad, stop being sad, stop being sad, and you'll stop being sad. It doesn't work like that. So when you're having periods of negative thoughts, instead of trying to think yourself out of them and getting this negative feedback loop and you'll never get out of it, what you need to do is you need to distract yourself from those negative thoughts through an engaging activity. And so an engaging activity is any kind of activity that involves a lot of external stimuli. When we're ruminating, our entire focus is on our internal world and our thoughts. What we're trying to do is shift our focus to the external world, and the easiest way to do that is with activities that have a lot of external stimuli. So a couple of the ones recommend, if you're involved in a competitive game of sport, it's difficult to be ruminating because you're focusing on a lot of different factors and things that are going on. If you're in a band or playing music, there's a lot of external stimuli. That's also very effective, but I'm just going to give you the most effective one. This is the easiest one. It's super easy. Everyone in this room can do it. When you start having negative thoughts, don't sit with them. Find someone and engage in a proper one-on-one conversation with them. And you guys can try this when you leave here today. The reason it's so effective is when you're engaged in a proper one-on-one conversation with someone, you're listening to what they're saying, you're thinking about what you're going to say next, you're reading their body language, and as a result, it's one of the most engaging possible activities that we as human beings can engage in. And by the way, you don't need to walk up to them and be like, hey, I'm ruminating, let's talk. That'd be a bit weird. You don't need to do that. That'd be a bit strange. They might not want to talk to you after you do that. Instead, just walk up to them and be like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? What's your thoughts on Donald Trump? Just start a conversation. Maybe don't start a conversation on that. That could get a bit aggressive. But start a conversation with them about anything. And what they've found is that if you can distract yourself from your thoughts for 20 minutes or more, 80% of the time you don't go back to the thoughts you were having prior to that distraction. So I want you guys to make this little mental note right now. It's quite simple. When you're having negative thoughts, don't sit with them. Find someone and engage in a proper one-on-one conversation with them about anything. It'll help you distract yourself from your thoughts. And for those of you that are thinking, okay, but what happens if I'm ruminating late at night and I don't have anyone else around me? Call up someone. So call up a friend, a partner or something. Talking on the phone is nearly as effective as in-person communication. It's not as effective, but it's better than nothing. And if there's no one that you feel comfortable or that you have that you can call, there's a whole bunch of numbers and resources that you'll get at the end of today where you can literally simply call up a number and have a talk and conversation with someone. But don't sit with negative thoughts. find someone and engage in a proper conversation with them, or do some other kind of engaging activity that involves a lot of external stimuli. All right, number seven. Number seven you might think is a bit, random. Number seven is to supplement your diet with omega-3. So when we're hunter-gatherers, our omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids in our bodies and in our brains, they were in balance by a ratio of 1:1. They're now currently out of balance for the majority of Westerners by a ratio of 1:16. So incredibly out of balance. And that's mainly because omega-6s come from our starchy foods, so our carbohydrates, and our diets are now much more starchy and carbohydrate laden than they were when we were prehistoric, and we're basically eating vegetables and meat, and that's all we basically ate. We weren't eating lots of breads and grains. But then the agricultural revolution came into effect, and we started to incorporate more grains into our diet, which meant our omega-6s went up, which meant our ratio to omega-6 and omega-3 got really skewed, which is bad for our mental health. It's better to have a more balanced ratio of omega-3 to omega-6s. The bad news is, in order to get your omega-3 back closer to your omega-6s, you'd have to eat the equivalent of about 5 to 6 pieces of salmon a day. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's a lot of fish. And also, salmon's expensive. Salmon's expensive. So what we recommend, and what I recommend instead, is to supplement your diet with this thing called omega-3 fish oil, or omega-3 flaxseed oil, or what was the one that you're currently taking? Or hemp seed oil. There's a whole lot of different oils that you can currently take to get omega-3, to get it back into balance. Now, if you look up the board, I've got a couple of numbers here. I don't know if you guys can see it. But right here, it's got 1,000 milligrams of EPA and 500 milligrams of DHA. In clinical studies, they've found that this is the concentration that has been found to have an antidepressant effect. On the back of any fish oil tablet box or flaxseed oil tablet box, you'll find, each tablet contains a certain amount of EPA and a certain amount of DHA. The reason why I don't recommend the amount of tablets to take is because every fish oil tablet brand, every flaxseed oil tablet brand, they have different concentrations of EPA and DHA. But what you want to be looking for and aiming for is roughly 1,000 milligrams of EPA, 500 milligrams of DHA each day, which on average, if I had to average it out, would be about 3 fish oil tablets a day. That's on average, but every brand's different. I've got this really strong brand that I only have to have 2 a day. But recommended, it's normally about 3 or so tablets a day to get this recommended dosage for positive mental health and to get your omega-3 and omega-6s back into balance. Now, by the way, not only is fish oil really good for your mind and your mental health, it's also good for your skin, it's good for your joints. If you go into any elderly home, the majority of people in the elderly home will be taking fish oil tablets because it's so good for their brain, it reduces the chances of dementia. It's a really important, powerful substance that you can take to improve your mental health, but it also has a whole host of other benefits. And by the way, of all the things I've talked about today, simply having 3 fish oil tablets in the morning with your Wheat Bix, it's probably the easiest thing I've talked about today to incorporate. A couple of things I do have to say, kind of legal caveats. If you're allergic to fish or seafood, generally it's not a good idea if you take fish oil tablets. And if you're unsure, make sure you check with a GP or medical practitioner. But normally, majority of people are not allergic to fish or seafood. If you are, there's a whole host of other alternatives, such as flaxseed oil and hemp seed oil that you can take. If you can't have fish product or meat product or you're allergic, there's also other alternatives. You can also just get it from your diet if you eat a lot of fish. It's just very difficult and quite expensive. So yeah, omega-3, really simple supplement, would highly recommend incorporating into your life. Last thing I'll say is, when it comes to omega-3, it's not like a miracle cure. You don't just have a couple of fish oil tablets and suddenly feel better. Just like with any depressant medication, it takes about 2 weeks to notice an impact because it takes time for your brain's omega-3 and omega-6 ratio to come closer together. So it takes a bit of time, but it's quite simple, positive, lots of benefits. So next time you go shopping, pick up some fish oil tablets, flaxseed oil tablets. It's about $10 for a pack of 100, very cheap, widely available, and just start to incorporate into your daily routine and life. All right, we're up to the last one today. Now, if you're starting to get a bit tired or losing concentration, or if anyone talks throughout this last one, I'm actually going to point you out because this last one is quite serious and probably the one I'm most passionate about. And the 8th lifestyle choice is to seek help early. Now, it would be ridiculous if I had cancer and I refused to go and seek treatment for cancer because I was embarrassed and ashamed what other people thought. It would be absurd if I broke my arm and I refused to go and see a doctor because I was scared that people would think I'm weak, or I'm inferior, or I'm different, or I'm weird. Well, mental illness is just like any other illness. And just like you would with any other illness, the earlier you seek help, the more likely you are to recover and to start feeling better. And you know what's really sad? The current statistic in Australia is that only about 1 in 3 people who are currently experiencing mental illness actually seek help. Imagine if only 1 in 3 people who had cancer actually sought help. Do you think rates of cancer would be increasing or decreasing? They'd be increasing just like they are with mental illness. And the reason for this is, unfortunately, there still is a bit of a stigma attached to mental illness. And people often think that if you have a mental illness, it means that you're weak, or you're inferior, or you're different, or you're weird. And nothing could be further from the truth. My dad was by far the toughest person I've ever met. Incredibly talented, successful, popular, intelligent people experience mental illness every single year. And so the key thing to remember is, just like you would with any other illness, the earlier you seek help, the more likely you are to recover and to start feeling better. And when it comes to this last one, this is all I really want you to remember. And this is the global standard amongst psychologists, psychiatrists. This is the global recommendation. If you've been feeling down or low or a lack of enjoyment in activities every single day for 2 weeks, that's when it's recommended that you seek help. And when I say seek help, I don't mean like straight away going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. When I say seek help, I mean simply just going up to someone and saying, hey, you know what? I haven't been feeling the best for the last 2 weeks. That's it. And the reason it's so important is often people with a mental illness, they wear a mask and they hide it from the rest of the world. And as a result, it can be a very lonely place. And what happens is when you simply just go up to someone, whether it's a friend or a loved one, and say, hey, you know what? I haven't been feeling the best for the last 2 weeks. You're now dropping that mask, and on top of that, you've now got someone to help you to start feeling better. And I'm so passionate about this one because presenting in schools and businesses over the last 7 and 8 years, I know so many, particularly young people, who are no longer here with us today because they probably didn't seek help early enough. So just remember, not just like this last 2 weeks, you've been feeling down and low for the last 2 weeks, in the next couple of days, talk to someone. Just say, hey, I'm not feeling the best. Express it, don't keep it to yourself. If at any point between now and the end of the year, you start to feel down or low for a period of 2 weeks, talk to someone, express yourself. If at any point for the rest of your life, you feel down or low for a period of around 2 weeks, don't keep it to yourself, just talk to someone and express yourself. And the good news is that once you take that first step, and that is always the first step of simply just telling someone I'm not feeling the best and not keeping it to yourself. Once you take the first step, the good news is in Australian society, there's actually so many places that you can go today to seek help. I'll list a couple for you guys right now. You go to Beyond Blue's website, arguably the biggest mental health charity in Australia. You can call Beyond Blue's number. It's a great number to call for a whole host of reasons. You can go to Black Dog Institute's website. They do a lot of amazing work. If you're under the age of 25, or if you've got kids under the age of 25, you can go to a Headspace Centre. This one's super important. If you're aged between the ages of 12 and 25, you can walk into a Headspace Centre, like completely anonymously off the street, say, I haven't been feeling the best for the last 2 weeks, or I haven't been feeling the best, I'd like to talk to someone. Generally, within a couple of hours, you'll be talking to a trained counsellor, psychologist, or psychiatrist completely for free. You can call Lifeline on 13 11 14. That's probably the best number to call in the case of an emergency or when something's really urgent. You can also get, currently in Australia, every single year, through Medicare, every person is entitled to 10 free sessions with a psychologist. So to get and see a psychologist, you simply go into a GP first. You say, I haven't been feeling the best, and then they'll refer you to the psychologist, and it's covered by Medicare, the first 10 free sessions. There's a whole host of other places you can go. Talk to a friend, a family member, someone in your sporting team. There's so many options, but you just have to have the courage to seek that help. And so with this last one, just remember, 2 weeks or thereabouts, don't keep things to yourself, tell someone, and then after that, there are so many places that you can go to seek help. And I've also got a whole bunch of resources with a couple of those places listed that you guys can take home with you. If you or a family member or someone you know needs to seek help, it's got all the places you can go in those resources. So over the course of the last hour, we've talked about 8 lifestyle choices. Now, I think you'd all agree these 8 lifestyle choices, they're pretty practical, they're pretty simple, they're not rocket science, they're not complicated. I want to quickly run through them, and as a bit of a reminder, number one, and by far the most important thing you can do for your mental health, is reduce and manage your stress levels. Number 2 was to exercise aerobically for how much each day? 15 minutes. Number 3 was to sleep for at least how much each night? 8 hours. Number 4 was to get how much sunlight each day? 30 minutes. Number 5 was to socially interact how much? As much as possible, exactly, as much as possible. People are good for us, social interaction is great for us. Number 6, when you're having negative thoughts, do an engaging activity. What's the best activity that you can do when you start to have negative thoughts? Talk. Just have a conversation, start a conversation with someone, and do something engaging. Number 7, supplement your diet with omega-3. On average, that's about 3 to 4 fish oil tablets per day. And number 8, seek help early. How many weeks should you be feeling down or low before you must tell someone and not keep it to yourself? 2 weeks. Always remember 2 weeks. And by the way, if you notice a family member or a friend over a period of 2 weeks having a bit of a change in behavior, not enjoying the activities that they used to enjoy, being a bit down or low, that's also the point where you ask, hey, like, how are you going? Are you okay? Generally, it's around the 2 week period that things start to develop. So sometimes we all have bad days. We all have like 2 bad days in a row. That doesn't necessarily mean you're depressed. It's when it goes on for a prolonged period of time, and that's when you might want to ask a family member or friend, look, I've been noticing you've been feeling down or low. How are you actually feeling? And asking like, are you okay? It was, are you okay about a couple of weeks ago as well. But don't be afraid to ask people, are they okay as well? This advice isn't just for yourself. It's also for the people in your lives. So these are the 8 lifestyle choices. Now I think what I'd like you guys to do is quickly look up at this board. You might be doing 2 of the 8, you might be doing 4 of the 8, you might be doing none of the 8. What I would like each of you to do right now is to look at this board and pick just one of these 8 lifestyle choices that you're going to make a conscious choice to implement into your life when you leave through these doors and you leave this presentation here today. And my advice, by the way, is pick the one that needs the most work in your life. The one that might have the biggest impact. So if you're one of those people that currently gets no exercise each day, maybe pick exercise. If you're one of those people that's living a life where you're constantly stressed, maybe start to monitor and manage your stress levels better. If you're one of those people that spends most of your day at a computer and you're relatively socially isolated, maybe start to try to incorporate more people and community into your life. Whatever it is, just pick out one of these things on this board to make a conscious decision to work on. And while you're doing that, while you're making that choice, I want to point out a word on the board. And the word's here in the top right-hand corner. And the word's choices. Every single thing on this board is a choice. Like you can choose to exercise, you can choose to go outside in the sun, you can choose to take fish oil supplements. Like every single thing on this board is a choice. And what I've realized doing this over the years is I can go into schools, I can go into businesses and conferences and stuff, and I can provide you with the information, hopefully entertain you and like motivate you a bit. But I can't make you do these things. Like I can't change your life. And so what I've realized over the years is that your life is literally just a culmination of the choices that you make every single day. That's all it is. And these 8 lifestyle choices have been found to reduce your chance of getting a mental illness and to improve your mental health and make you a happier person. So my question for everyone in attendance is why not implement at least one of these things into your life going forward? Just one, and then you can build from there. And the reason I want you to do that is it's been found to improve your mental health and happiness for those with and without a mental illness. You'll see on the board without is emboldened in orange. The reason I've got it there is often when I'm in presentations, people will be listening and they might go, you know what? I don't have a mental illness. I'm fine. I don't need to listen to James. I don't need to listen to this presentation. It's not for me. The entire reason I started Breaking Free and the charity that I run and the whole reason this program exists is to provide you with the information, the tools, and the resources to live a mentally healthy lifestyle now to prevent you from getting a mental illness in the future. It is so much easier to prevent someone from getting a mental illness than it is for someone to get a neurochemical imbalance in the brain and have to get their brain chemically back into balance. It is so much easier to prevent, and that's the reason I started Breaking Free, is because I looked at the landscape of mental health charities in Australia, and it's all focused on raising awareness and reducing the stigma or treatment. And there was one big, massive hole in the middle, which is preventing it in the first place through lifestyle. And so that's why I've got here, prevention is the best cure. That's why this program exists. And we're up to the final, probably about 2 minutes of the program and the presentation here today. And I saved the most important part of this presentation for last. We've got the 8 lifestyle choices. Hopefully you've all picked out one you're going to implement in your life when you leave here today. And on top of that, we've also got a philosophical choice. And the philosophical choice is to put your mental health first. And what I mean by that is whenever you're making important decisions when it comes to like job, family, relationships, base your decision on what's going to be best for your mental health and what's going to make you happiest as a person. And I'm going to get a bit personal with this one. I saw this firsthand with my dad. You could have everything in the world to live for, but if you don't have your mental health, you've got nothing. Every single person in this room right now, you have one mind, and you're going to have it with you in every single moment and every single experience of your entire life. So it has to be your number one priority. When you're picking friends, relationships, career, when you're making important life decisions, you have to base it on, is this good for my mental health and does this make me happy as a person? And I made this philosophical choice after my dad passed away. I went, you know what? There's no point being wealthy or successful or popular if you're not happy. There's absolutely no point. And so I decided right then and there that I'm going to base my life and every decision in it, is this good for my mental health and does this make me happy and fulfilled as a person? And that's what we're trying to do in schools. We're trying to redefine how success is taught and what it looks like. Success is being mentally healthy, it's being happy. That's a happy, that's a healthy, that's a good life. And so that's the kind of the philosophical choice we're pushing for, is to put your mental health first. And if you were just to make this decision, like before you walk out these doors here today, you know what? Every decision in my life, I'm gonna ask myself, is this good for my mental health? Does this make me happy? That will have the biggest impact of anything I've talked about in this presentation here today. And you might have noticed throughout this presentation, I've been wearing an orange wristband. On the orange wristband, it says, I put my mental health first. And it's kind of a personal reminder that as I go through life, this is what I'm going to prioritize, this is what I'm going to put first. And on the other side, it's got the name of the charity that I run called Breaking Free. And I've brought about like 50 or so along with me today. They're completely free. If you'd like to take one and make that philosophical choice and wear it with pride each day, not just throw it out, feel free to take one. It's going to be completely free. In addition to that, you're going to all receive a whole bunch of additional resources as well. So these are, it's up to you. This is up to you whether you want to take one. What every single one of you will be receiving though is a mental health card. I'll quickly run over to my bag and show you what it is. But this is something that everyone will be receiving. And so the mental health cards, they look like this. It's like a business card. On one side, it's got the 8 lifestyle choices we've talked about today. So you have like a reminder of the things we've talked about to look after your mental health. And on the other side, it's got all the details about the charity that I run and all the places that you can go to seek help if you or someone you know needs to seek help. What I'll do, I've literally got thousands of these things. So if you want to take 1 or 10 for your family or 5 or for some people in your workplace, whatever it is, I'll set up there and you can just ask me however many you want and I'll give you that amount. My recommendation with these mental health cards, put it in your wallet or put it in your purse, somewhere that you can see it every single day. What I've found is if you put this in your wallet or your purse and you take it out a couple of times over the course of a 4-week period, you'll know how to look after your mental health. Like, I'll be honest, I don't have this in my wallet at all because I know how to do these things now. I know when I'm feeling down or low, I'm gonna go outside in the sun. I know if I haven't exercised for 3 days, I better go exercise. I know if I've been socially isolated for 2 or 3 days, time to start talking to people. I know when I have negative thoughts, to start a conversation or do an engaging engaging activity and not to continue ruminating. I know to seek help. I know how to do all these things and look after my mental health. And you might have come into this presentation here today and not really had an idea about exactly what to do to look after your mental health. You've now got 8 very specific, simple things that you can incorporate into your life. Start with one, and even if you don't necessarily think you're going to use it, keep it because you might have a family member or a friend that might need this advice that you could help, and you've also got the places that they can go to seek help. So take this, put it in your wallet for yourself and other people in your life. And a common question I get, and we'll do questions in about 2 minutes, a common question I get, and I'm going to try to premeditate before you ask it, is what do I do if I've got someone in my family or a friend who's experiencing a mental illness? The best thing you can do with someone who's experiencing mental illness is to do shared activities. That's the best thing. So often instead of saying, look, I'm here for you, like reach out whenever you want, which is the common vernacular that's used, people often say, like, I'm here for you, I'm here for you. People that are depressed or severely anxious don't feel like reaching out. They don't feel like reaching out. The best thing you can do to show that you're there for someone and to help someone who's experiencing mental illness in your family or your friendship circle is to do these things with them. So instead of saying, I'm here for you, say, on Saturday morning, let's go for a 30-minute walk down to the beach. All right? Like, instead of saying, I'm here for you, call up and have a conversation every Thursday. Say, every Thursday, we're going to talk on the phone. Instead of saying, like, I'm here for you, make sure to, like, ask them, how's your stress? Like, what's your stress levels like? What can I do to reduce your stress for you? Do these things with them. That's the best way you can help someone who's experiencing mental illness, not just simply saying words, it's shared activities. So take this to help other people as well. And in addition to that, get excited. I'm excited. We're going back to high school. We're going back to junior school. I got stickers. I got stickers. Woo! We got stickers. All right, so I've got a couple of different stickers. We've got 2 varieties of stickers. I'll show you both varieties. This is also, you can take as many stickers as you want. So we've got 2 types. We got one here. It's just got the 8 lifestyle choices on it. Pretty basically the same as the card, but you can stick it on your fridge, on your diary, on your spouse's forehead. It doesn't really matter, just stick it somewhere that you can see every single day. And then on top of that, we've also got, and this is, you don't have to use this, it's a bit cliche, but we've kind of got a template of what a mentally healthy day looks like. So often people go, oh, how can I incorporate all those 8 things into a day? This kind of gives you a rough idea of a mentally healthy day. It's kind of a template to use to realize, you know what, it's not too difficult to live a mentally healthy lifestyle. It doesn't take much effort. So if you want a mentally healthy day template, feel free to take this. If you want this sticker, take this. If you want both, take both. If you want 50 of them, say you want 50 of them and you'll get 50 of them. We've got heaps of those. And finally, I don't know if you guys have Instagram, but we've also got an Instagram page for the charity that I run called Breaking Free Charity. So if you want to go and see the work that we do, you can go onto Breaking Free Charity. And myself also, I present at schools for Breaking Free Charity, and now I also present in businesses and conferences to staff members to teach them how to be mentally healthy, because there's a lot of research out there that a happy employee is a productive employee. And so now I'm doing these presentations like I did at EC Connect in businesses, quite similar to this. Normally it's a bit longer and more comprehensive and more engaging. But if you are interested in having me come and present in your workplace, or you've got a place or a friend that might need someone to come and present, I also do that. And my business cards are over there, but you can come up to me and I'll give you a business card. So this is the charity, Breaking Free Charity, if you want to follow on Instagram or Facebook. And if you want to follow me personally and what I do, it's James Peterson Speaker. And you can go to my website, James Peterson Speaker as well. And it's got all that information there. And that's all the resources for today. I just want to finish by saying thank you for being an incredible and amazing audience. I've really enjoyed this today. And I want to finish by saying what my dad would have said 100% if he was still with us here today. And that's please, please, please look after your mental health, because it's by far the most important thing you all have. Thanks, guys. And if you've got it, I don't know if we've got time, but if you've got any questions, I can answer them. But I'll also, sometimes questions are quite personal on this topic, so I'll stay behind for like 20, 30 minutes after you guys want to come up and talk to me one-on-one.
Just really a comment. First off, I'm very sorry about loss of your dad. Thank you for sharing. Secondly, just really a comment. I have accessed the mental health care plan a couple of times over the last few years for toxic workplace stuff. I mentioned that when I was looking for income protection when I started my own business up, and I got refused. So if you are accessing the mental health care plan, think about whether or not to mention it to the insurance companies if you're going for income protection.
Yeah.
So just in a work environment or around the business, sorry. Ooh, hello, yeah, maybe. About 40 staff,
Yep.
And the coronavirus, of course, was interesting to see the variety of people struggling with that. So I probably had about maybe 20%, which could see that they had some issue or struggle because they couldn't control it.
Yep.
So really that control thing came really through with some people. Now, of course, trying to help them, I did, okay, but as you said, oh yeah, there's help everywhere and just seek help, whatever. Would you recommend to use those 8 points at work, or maybe put them up and maybe
100%.
do a summary of that? Because that's the problem I have as being an engineer, of course. As an engineer, you have a problem and you solve it. That doesn't work with mental issues.
No, it's much more complicated.
It's much more complicated. And now I said, oh, how can I help and things like that. So I found actually the 8 points very good.
Yeah.
So you would recommend to do that in a staff meeting and say, maybe explain these things. And,
Yeah, exactly. That's like, so when I present in businesses, we do all that, and then we often we have posters, we got stickers, all that kind of stuff that get put up. You put up around the workplace with the 8 lifestyle choices on them. It's sometimes It's sometimes not as effective if you just put the 8 lifestyle tips up with no context, because people just see and they won't really understand what it means, and they won't take it as seriously. Because the thing is like with these presentations, what I've learned over the years is like most people know all this stuff. Most people know to do these things, and it's the actual presentation that makes people open their eyes up and realize I've got to start doing them. It's not necessarily a case of not knowing what to do. It's often a case of not being motivated or having an understanding of how important it is to do those things. So I definitely would recommend putting those things up in the workplace. But if you'd be interested, I would love to like present at your company or give a context to those 8 lifestyle choices, so it's not just like 8 lines that don't really have any context behind them.
Yeah, being the boss, they're not going to tell me. Well, why would you tell the boss?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So then I think, well, you could see that they're struggling. You can see that, the one's washing their hands, it's a bit, they struggle with it. So I also try to see how you can help them. So maybe a presentation.
And what we did, we did this a couple months ago, is it's really good if you've got like the leadership team or the CEOs in a company there, because when I get to the 8th one about seek help early, I'll literally say, I've talked to the bosses and everything, they want you to communicate with them. We want an open dialogue, and sometimes the CEO will even get up and say, look, I want to hear your problems, I'm here for you. There's no punishment if you've got a mental illness, you're feeling low. And so sometimes in these presentations, it opens up like a discourse that makes people in the workplace feel more comfortable to come to you. So at the moment, you might be thinking, oh, they would never come to me. But if we had like a a 2-hour kind of as a setting where we all like kind of express how we're feeling, and you say, look, this is a safe environment, I want you guys to be happy here, I'm here to help, then they might be more inclined to talk to you in the future. Like, yeah. Laughter's great. Well, no, laughter's very important. Laughter's very important. I try to use laughter as much as possible. Yeah. Well, like laughter probably comes under the social interaction, just being around people and laughing and spending time and not being isolated by yourself. Very important. Very important. Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
I'll set up the resources.
So guys, thank you for attending. Our hope is that everybody can take something away from these events that we put on. And I think James has given everybody a lot of things that you can take away. And especially not only helping yourself, but helping others, which is an amazing thing that James is doing as well. You know, very inspirational. And that's why we've had him back here. So, yep, a couple of thanks before we go. Firstly, thank you to Joe and Portia for the food tonight. Thank you very much for Logan Startup Hub and EC Connect. Same with Innovate Logan. Keep an eye on Innovate Logan, join up to grow our ecosystem here in Logan. Thanks to the Logan City Council and Advance Queensland. But most of all, thank you to James. Thank you.
I'll just go around and give them the cards.
Sure.
Here you go. Do you just want one or how many?